Prior to his university career, he taught in elementary, middle, and high school classroom for 9 years. Dr. Johnson is the author of numerous articles, book chapters, and books related to literacy and learning, and hosts a podcast called The Reading Instruction Show. Professor Johnson, welcome to the Congress again, and the screen is all yours.
All right, thank you. I'm very glad to be here. And give me just a minute to make sure I'm all here. All right, I'm hoping that you can all see my presentation, and if not, please make sure you let me know. This is the title, Planning and Conducting Action Research for Professional Development. In the chat room, I have left some links.
Mesleki gelişimi ile ilintili olarak bu başlığı ele alacağım ve aynı zamanda chat penceresi üzerinden de paylaşımda bulunacağım. Bu sunumların YouTube'da nerede yer aldığını gösteren link paylaşımları olacak bunlar ve oradan da
Are some technical difficulties here. I'm not quite sure what's going on. Okay, well, we will have to go this way. It's not allowing me to see, to show the slides for some reason, and I'm not quite sure what's happening. So I apologize for that. I don't know what's going on. Okay, there we go. There we go. Excellent. All right, and there's my website. If you want to get a hold of me, www.teaching-reading.com. Thank you for your patience here. These are the goals of our workshop today: to understand what action research is, to know how to conduct an action research project, and most importantly, to be able to use action research for teacher professional development. At the end of the workshop, you will know these. This is an overview of today's presentation, and you can see the basis there. So let's jump right in by defining our terms. What is action research? It's a type of research related to one's professional practice. It can be in education, but also it could be social work or some other profession. But it's a type of research related to one's professional practice. And we are in education, so we are looking at it in terms of education. A formal definition there. It's a systematic process. And that's the important term, systematic process. Used to study a school, your classroom, or any teaching learning situation. And the purpose of action research is to understand what's going on and to improve the quality of what's happening there, improve the quality of the actions or the instruction taking place. And action research, if you understand it, is a powerful tool for teacher professional development because, as I will say many times during this presentation, it enables you to link research and research-based theory directly to what you're doing in the classroom. Thus, it is the ultimate form of teacher professional development. So let's look at what it is. First, let's understand what action research is. There are 7 descriptors, and we'll be looking at each one of those. So just take a minute. The first thing, it is a systematic method, systematic, used to analyze and evaluate or to solve a problem. Systematic and orderly way for you to observe your teaching practice, to explore what's happening, or to solve a problem in a school, in a classroom. It's a method, meaning there's a way to go about it, but it must be planned up front. It must be methodical. However, the nice thing about action research is it's flexible. There's a certain amount of freedom in how you can collect data, how you can analyze data, and how these data can be presented. But it is not an experiment, and we'll look at that a little bit more. Action research is different from experimental research. Often action research is confused with anything goes. It is not an anything goes methodology. Action research is not simply describing what you think or your ideas. Action research is not simply describing an interesting project that you're doing or a unit or describing a strategy that you use. That's not action research. And action research is not simply explaining a pedagogical method that you use or something that worked well. This is not action research. It is systematic. An underlying assumption of any research is you are an unbiased observer. You do not start with the answer. Even though you may think method X is the best method, you don't conduct action research to prove it's the best method. You may ask, what are the effects of method X? But you must be an impartial observer to the greatest extent possible. The results of your action research should be an honest and an unbiased accounting of what is occurring. So the onus is on you to establish a certain amount of credibility by being an unbiased observer. Action research projects vary in length. The length, of course, of any project is determined by the question. Can I answer the question? By the nature of the inquiry, by the research environment, and by the parameters of the data collection. These all impact the length of the project. But in general, if you are an undergraduate student, and I teach undergraduates, I sometimes have my students observe a minimum of 2 class observations. These are small action research projects. For teachers trying a new strategy, a minimum of 2 weeks for data collection. And these are just generalizations to think about to give you some sense of data collection. More formalized action research projects for professional presentations, for academic journals, or for a master's thesis. You should consider 2 to 9 months. And those are just rules of thumb to give you a sense. But for undergraduate students, some great projects can be done in 2 observations. However, if the data collection is too short, you run the risk of presenting an unrealistic view of the educational setting that you are viewing. So you're always weighing that in. Longer views give you a more accurate presentation, a more accurate view of that reality.
Daha doğru olmasını sağlar. Buradaki gözlemlerinizin çıktılarının, yorumladığınız çıktıların tanımladığı
Better than less, but not always. The study must be adequately planned before beginning to collect data. There's a plan and schedule in place. That makes it a systematic inquiry versus an impressionistic view, having that plan and that schedule. However, thus said, one of the advantages of action research is that plan and data collection often change. That's common for these things to change as the study progresses. Flexibility, as long as you describe it in your report. This is why we changed, this is what we did, and this is why we made the changes. If something's not working, you change it. That is the flexibility that you have with an action research project. And I'll show you some examples of data to collect in just a minute. In an action research project, your observations should be regular, systematic, but they don't have to be long. You can have some observations that last just a minute or two, where you're observing things and putting your notes in a file folder, or an hour or more. But the observations must be consistent and pre-planned. You have a schedule, and I'll show you that in just a minute. But observations are just one form of data to collect. There's a variety of other data, and I'll show you some of these in just a minute. But your observations must be pre-planned. They don't have to be long, but they have to be consistent. The big thing, action research is grounded in theory. You connect the questions and the conclusions to existing theory. This provides a context in which to understand your research. You are doing a review of the literature, and this lends credibility to what you're seeing and what you're saying. The review of the literature is important. It lends credibility to your results. And I'll hit on this several times, but that review of the literature is what connects your research directly to your classroom practice. Action research is not an experimental study. You are not trying to disprove a hypothesis. There are no experimental and control groups. There's no independent and dependent variables. You are not trying to generalize to a larger population. The goal is to understand what's occurring in a particular setting, in your classroom setting. That's the goal, not to generalize to a larger population, but to understand what's happening in your classroom or your school. Now, quantitative methods can sometimes be used with caution, but most often qualitative types of forms of research are used. But you can use them with caution. It is not an experimental study. You're not comparing one group to another. You are observing to understand. So here are the steps. There are 9 steps to action research, and this is a recursive process, meaning you don't always go through them in a strict linear fashion. Some of these may be repeated or reviewed several times, but this will give you a sense of exactly how to conduct an action research project. Step 1, you decide what to study. You ask a question. What problem do I have? What do I want to study? What's of interest to me? What do I want to analyze or evaluate in my classroom? I'm teaching reading. It's not going well. I'd like to analyze what's happening there. So step 1, ask a question, identify a problem, or select a research topic. Step 2, the important part, is where you do a review of the literature. You set the problem, the question, or the research topic in a theoretical context. You examine professional journals, books, and other professional research. This is how you connect the action research to current theories. And again, it provides a theoretical context, it lends credibility to what you are saying, and you're able to link
Professor
theory.
Johnson, excuse me. I think there's a problem with the transition of your the slides. Are you on the same the slide teaching reading with your photo? So the participants are sending a message. They cannot see the slides.
Can you see it now?
Yes, now, yes.
All right, sorry about that. I'm glad that you,
Thank you. Sorry for that.
that's very well. I'm glad that you did that. I apologize. There's always going to be some technical errors when you go from one continent to another continent. All right, so step 2, you set the problem or research topic in a theoretical context. You are doing the review of the literature. You're connecting the topic to current theories. This lends credibility to what you're saying and what you're doing. And of course, the theoretical context helps you understand what you're observing, helps you understand the phenomena being observed. So that review of the literature is very, very important in an action research project for professional development. Now, there are 2 approaches to doing a literature review. The traditional approach is to do a literature review before collecting data. And this sometimes can help you formulate the question, or refine the method or the pedagogy, or provide ideas for collecting data. That is the most common, that is the traditional approach to doing a lit review. But with action research, the second one, some people do a review of the literature as data are being reported and conclusions are being drawn. Here they collect the data, and then they link the literature to each concluding point. They are connecting the literature to what they are finding. Most people do the first one, the traditional view, but you can do a review after the data are collected as well. The onus is always on you, the researcher, to create a credible, coherent report that's grounded in a theoretical context. There's a certain amount of freedom in how you organize your project and your report. But again, the onus is on the researcher to prepare a credible, coherent report, an unbiased accounting of what you see. Step number 3, once you have step number 1, step number 2, once you've asked your question, and once you've done your lit review, step 3 is to make a plan for data collection. That is methodology. What data are going to be examined? You decide how it's going to be collected and how often it will be collected. This is your methodology. And I'll show you some ideas for data collection in just a minute. But your data collection must be determined before the research begins. Action research is a systematic observation. This is what makes it systematic. And in general, you want to have at least 2 kinds of data to collect. Even in your short projects, you want to have a minimum of 2, and usually a maximum of 4 or 5. You don't want to have too much data to collect, but a minimum of 2. This is a form of triangulation. By seeing the phenomena from 2 different points, it gives you a sense of triangulation. And the more types of data, the more different ways you have to observe phenomena. So identify at least 2 types of data to collect. Step 4, you actually begin to collect and analyze the data. Often data are analyzed as it's collected. With qualitative data, you're using inductive analysis. You're looking for patterns and categories to emerge as you're collecting the data, as you are seeing things. And oftentimes, the initial analysis influences further data collection. It gives you some ideas for what you're seeing. As you see these patterns and these categories, it gives you a structure to observe what you're seeing as you are taking notes. And as I stated previously, action research is a dynamic, ever-changing process. It's very common to change teaching strategies or sources of data, or even the focus of the study as data are being collected. If something's not working, you can change it. And change is acceptable as long as the change is described and the reasons for change are fully described when you're reporting the research. Again, if you find your strategy is not working, change it. That's part of the data, why something did not work and why you had to change it. If I'm using a reading strategy, if I'm studying it and I find that it's not working, I change it, I analyze why it's not working, and I change. That becomes part of the data. That's the flexibility. As long as I describe it in my report, that is okay. Step 6, this could be part of an ongoing process, but you're doing your final analysis and organization of the data. This should be the final step of an ongoing process. And inductive analysis is you are inducing order on the field by looking for groups and categories. So you are describing how many total things were recorded, how many categories, and how many in each category. This is analytic induction or inductive analysis. And quantitative data can be collected and analyzed as well here. Step 7, interpret the data, tell what the data means, and you draw conclusions, but conclusions are always based on the data. Here you're answering your research question or you're addressing the problem, but it is based on the data. Based on the data, this is what I conclude. Based on the data, here's how reading should be taught. Based on the data, here's how this problem was solved. It's based on the data. And step 8 is where you put the action in action research. Based on your conclusions and recommendations, you design a plan of actions to implement. You implement your plan, and that plan will need to be evaluated as to its effectiveness. And the cycle of action research continues. As you implement your plan, your next project is to evaluate your plan again. So that's step 8. And step 9, to be recognized by your school district or as a legitimate form of professional development, you should be expected to produce some form of a product or a presentation to report your findings. And I'll describe some of these, but it could be a written report. It could be a scholarly report, or it could be a presentation to colleagues or a conference or in a webinar or some sort of thing. But step number 9 is to report your findings. And if you're using it for professional development, you should be expected to have some sort of product at the end. All right. Why don't I see if I have any questions here? I see there's one in the question mark, and I can't read that. It's in a different language. Okay.
It's not a question. It was just because of the problem with the slides. So no problem.
Okay, very good. So if there's any questions, I will stop in between the next one. All right, I'll entertain questions at the end, or I can entertain questions at the end of each session as well. All right, what kind of data do you collect? You want to do an action research project? Okay, well and good. So what should I collect? Well, I want to give you some ideas of the different types of data that you can collect. And again, I've said this before, and it's worth repeating. There must be a plan in place to collect the data before you begin. It's systematic. What data you will collect, when you'll collect them, how you collect your data, and how often you'll collect your data. Now, I recommend some sort of simple calendar or checklist to record which data were collected, when, and this makes sure that I'm collecting all kinds of data, all types of data are equally represented, and I'm systematic. Here's the types of data I would collect, and simply the dates that I collected them. This is one way to make sure I am being systematic in the types of data I'm collecting. Some sort of calendar or checklist. And with action research, you're taking many small looks over time using different types of data. It's not a single snapshot of a single incident like a test score. That's a single snapshot occurring in time. I'm collecting many types of data over time to give me a more realistic sense of what's happening in that classroom. And the question should always determine the type of data you collect and how you collect it. The method should not determine the question. The question should determine the method. Now, in some circles, only experimental research is allowed. In that sense, the method is determining the question. In action research, you ask the question first, and then you say, what type of data will best answer that question? How can I collect data to answer that question or to solve that problem? So to give you an example of types of data that you might collect, we'll look at 12 types of data, and these are just some of the data you might collect. You're limited only by your imagination, as long as it's systematic and you're an unbiased observer of the types of data that you might collect. The first I recommend with all projects It's a journal or notebook or research logs to record your observations related to your project, your reflection, describing each step of the process. This becomes invaluable when you're piecing together the chronology of your report. It's like a diary. And you can have a variety of things in here: your observations, diagrams, sketches, student comments, your thoughts, your impressions. In this research log or research journal, whatever you want to call it. Some people prefer a paper notebook. I prefer a paper notebook, but it could be on a computer as well. But you're recording what's happening, but it's after, not while the teaching is taking place, but it's after the teaching is taking place, at the end of the day. That's sometimes confused with the second one, field notes, your observations. These are written observations of what you see taking place. This could be in the log or journal, or sometimes it's just on a scrap of paper or an observation, and each daily observation is put in a file folder at some point. So this is a description of exactly what you see taking place. Now the question is, when people begin observing and taking notes, what should I record? What should I look for? And I recommend just start writing what you are seeing taking place when you first begin to observe, and you see that categories emerge as you are taking notes over time. So just start writing what you see happening. Now there are 3 types of field notes to take. The first one is a thick description while teaching is taking place. Now, if you're the teacher, this is very difficult to do because you have to be fully engaged. So you really can't do it if you're teaching, but you can do it if you're observing someone else teaching. The second type of note is a quick note while you are teaching. If you observe something, this is where you write an anecdotal note on a scrap of paper or on your lesson plan or someplace, just a quick impression of something you see happening. And you can put that in a file folder or someplace else. And then the third one, notes and reflections after each lesson. Notes recorded in your journal or research log, or on the back of your lesson plan. Notes and reflection after. Usually 2 and 3 are the types of field notes that are taken. The third type of data is a form of a checklist. This is a list of attributes or behaviors or traits or assignments or skills that you're looking for. And then a check to indicate if it was present or to what degree, or a tally mark. And I'll show you some examples of this. This is a student checklist, a way to collect data. Students did this. At the end of each class, put a tally mark behind each of the activities done. So they are recording this data. They're writing topics, skills learned. So this is a form of data, a student checklist that they are filling out in small group or individually for their writing. Yes, student data is a valuable form of data. Could be a teacher checklist. The student and things I'm looking for, and I'm simply rating each one of these. And again, it's a series of small snapshots taken over time to give me a sense of what I'm observing. And again, writing, I'm looking at many students, and I'm able to, this is just an example. able to rate each one of these things on a writing form that I'm looking at? And again, attributes I'm looking for, I'm observing reading. This is a single student. I can observe 3 students a day. And at the end of 2 weeks, have an observation on every student. 2 or 3 weeks. This is a checklist where these are science skills, and the teacher is rating and the student is rating. Another form of data collection. There's a variety of checklists, but you have an attribute, and then you either check if the attribute is present, or you have some sort of rating to describe the degree of that attribute or the level of that attribute. You might also collect rubrics. Now, I tend not to like rubrics. I tend to think they're more work than they're actually worth. But here you have your attributes or trait, and you're describing each level of the trait. These can be a little bit cumbersome to create and to use. And remember, you're taking little snapshots over time. Conferences and interviews, a great source of data. A conference is where students talk about some aspect of their work. You may have a series of prompts, but not a planned list of questions. The goal is to get the students to talk as much as possible. And you can record these, audio recording, or take notes, general impressions. You can do conferences in small groups as well, where students talk about their work or some aspect of the class. These can be 2 minutes to 15 minutes. And again, you're taking notes, your general impressions. You can audio record these if you wish. An interview is where students respond to planned questions. These are conducted usually individually, but you want to keep them short with some follow-up questions. And I recommend audio recording them so you can play it back. The 6th type of data to collect is some sort of video or audio recording of your class, of your teaching. Now, a video, you get information related to students' nonverbal behaviors, locations, and movements. But I found that the camera is generally intrusive. It creates an artificial experience instead of an authentic experience. I found that an audio recorder gives me almost as much data as a camera without being as intrusive. It's quicker, it's easier, and it's far less intrusive. I just start the recording as the class is started. So I prefer an audio recording. And a data retrieval chart is any visual organizer that helps you collect and organize data. Here's a trait related to working in small groups. And I'm observing and just tally marks the number of times I'm seeing each trait that I'm looking for. And students' products or performances. Now, collecting data again is like taking soil samples. I don't dig up the whole lawn when I want to see what kind of soil. I take little bits of soil from different parts. So you're collecting little bits of student data over time. You're not collecting and recording everything, just representative samples. And as far as students' products and performances, yes, you can include test scores and other quantifiable data as well. Surveys of parents or teachers or students, a good sense of how they're perceiving the experience. Surveys enable you to collect a variety of information very quickly. And as one type of data source, they can be invaluable. Now, there's two types of questions on a survey. Of course, the closed response survey question, where you provide a number of choices for the respondents to select. Here's an example. What's your favorite reading genre? And they have their choices. You can ask a number of questions quickly. It gives you an exact numerical, some exact data. However, these can be misleading or inaccurate or controlling simply by the choices that you give. But this is one type of question to ask. The open-ended question asks the question and it allows respondents unlimited choices. What kind of books do you like to read? And then you look at the data and you use inductive analysis to create categories and numbers within each category. This is a little bit more messy, but it tends to be a more accurate sense of respondents' thinking. So I prefer open-ended questions, maybe with one or two closed response questions if I'm doing surveys. Attitude and rating scales given to teachers, parents, or students. A Likert-like scale, where it records the strength of a response to a question or a statement. Reading is fun, and the strength of their response. And if you want quantifiable data, some numbers, you can use that as well. Reading is fun. I know how to use science skills. This is a computer survey. And then with younger students, I like to provide fewer choices or use graphics. I like to read very much, some very little. Again, adopt and adapt these ideas. Rating scales are used to determine the strength of a response, how much, how often, how many times something occurred. I read at home every day. Again, these can be given to students usually, but to parents or to other teachers, depending on your question.
Ve aynı şekilde sorulara bağlı olarak da buradaki derecelendirmeyi, buradaki niteliklendirmeyi yapmak mümkün olur.
And of course, archival data, past grades, test scores, cumulative folders, etc. My throat gets a little dry, so excuse me if I have to take a drink. All right, these are some ideas for some types of data that you might collect. Give you some ideas. These are just some ideas. So let's look at part 4, action research for professional development. As I said before, it is a powerful form. It's economical, it's efficient. Professional development for teachers, because you're developing new knowledge directly related to your classroom. It promotes reflective teaching and thinking. It should expand your pedagogical repertoire to give you more strategies for teaching something. And as I said, it directly connects the research literature to what you're doing in the classroom. That's why I think it is the most effective form of teacher professional development. Because instead of the literature over there and classroom practice over there, it makes that direct connection. It's effective, it's economical, and it is efficient. That's why we have to provide teachers both time and incentive to engage in action research projects for professional development. That's how we improve our schools. And we need to provide a platform for teachers to present their findings and engage in professional dialogue with peers. This is how we enhance learning. This is how we make our schools better. This is how we continue to evolve our field of education. So 2 points, and I can't overemphasize this enough. You're linking research and research-based theory directly to classroom practice. That is an important part of action research for professional development. And action research must be shared for professional development. It does some good if it's just for you, but you need to share the results with colleagues, with parents, with administrators, with community members. This makes this heightens the sense of professionalism at the same time, as well as getting new research-based ideas into the classroom. So action research projects can be used for professional development, for problem solving. Now here's a graphic organizer I use when I'm teaching students in the elementary grades problem solving. I have them describe the current state of a problem, the desired state, and the necessary steps to get there. Well, a similar process is used for problem solving in action research. Means and analysis with action research. The first step is to identify a problem related to learning or teacher effectiveness. Identify the difference between the real and the ideal. All right. Maybe you might want to see students engaged more high-level thinking, more rates of transfer. So you identify the problem first, and then the desired state. Here's what is, here is what I would like. Problem could be related to student learning or teacher effectiveness. Here's what I would like. Step 3, conduct the review of the literature. You are looking for research-based strategies related to your problem. You might, and then step 4, here you generate a list of steps or conditions necessary to get to the desired state. So based on the review of the literature, I'm simply describing some steps, does not have to be in chronological order. Steps to get from desired, from real to the ideal. Then I construct an initial plan and implement it. Identify a problem. This is the desired state, review of the literature, things necessary, my plan, and implement it. And if I'm doing this for professional development, usually an administrator has to approve of the plan. Here's a research proposal for problem solving. The current state, the desired state, important ideas from the literature review. You decide how many. Generate a list of steps. Here's my plan, and here's my plan for sharing the results. So an administrator would sign off on your research proposal, or maybe ask you to make changes. All right, what if you want to implement a new strategy? Well, you can use analytical evaluation. If you maybe want to try a new strategy like project-based learning or discovery learning or inquiry learning, one of these new strategies, you need to analyze and evaluate this new strategy. So here's the steps for analytical evaluation to try and implement and evaluate a new strategy that you would like to try in your classroom. Could be one of these or something totally different. Maybe you've heard of this thing called universal design for learning. I want to find out about it and I want to try it. Great, let's do some action research. And again, you conduct the review of the literature to get information about the effectiveness of that new strategy. What is it? How might it be implemented? What's the purpose? Based on that, you design a question. This helps guide your action research project. It could be, is this strategy effective? Can it be implemented in my classroom? What are the effects of this strategy? What will happen if I use this strategy? Does this strategy work? But I have a question to guide my research project. Step 3 is to make a plan for that initial implementation. I like to have this done in small groups with teachers. Small groups of teachers can give you insight. So here you would generate, share, and solicit ideas from other teachers before you begin implementing the new strategy. This is how I would use it, or this is how I do use it. And then complete a proposal form. Again, the strategy, important things learned from the literature review, question, plans, and a check-in date. Generally with teachers, you want to implement the strategy for at least 2 weeks, and then report back. This is what happened when I used the strategy. So you get your plan, you implement it, try it for 2 weeks, and then report back. This can become the basis of a more formalized action research project. So let's say you're doing a master's thesis, a doctor's thesis, a PhD, or writing an article. A more formalized action research project, you start with a review of the literature. And I recommended using an annotated bibliography versus a formal lit review. And that's simply a list of resources used and a short annotation or description of each one. Teachers have complicated lives. We can't expect them to always write like professors. So if teachers are doing this, I prefer an annotated bibliography. Then you identify the question or the topic. Methodology, this is the data I'm going to collect. When I'm going to collect it, how much, directly related to that question. The question determines the methodology. The results are just the data. This is what I found. This is what I observed right here. And then the conclusions are always based on the results. The results are just the data, unbiased observations. And then conclusions and discussion are based on the data. Or your question might be related to pedagogical content knowledge. A strategy related to a specific subject area. Those are all questions related to pedagogical content knowledge that you might want to ask and use. Action research can always also be used to examine student learning. Are my students learning? The following types of questions. What are they learning? What might be impeding their learning? What big lessons are they taking? So I'm assessing student learning here. Now, resist the urge to evaluate or measure students' learning only in terms of test scores. Instead, because you're describing students only in terms of numbers, and that's a limited view, think about using students' products or performances. And you can use each of these types of data, and these are the types of data collection described earlier. To measure and assess student learning. These are more authentic forms of assessments: student, attribute, ideas, or insights. These are called more authentic forms of evaluation and assessment. You can also use action research to evaluate your own performance as a teacher. Asking a specific question is very important if I want to analyze my performance as a teacher. Are there more effective ways to teach this skill? Am I being effective in teaching this skill or concept? What's going on here? Why am I effective? What's occurring in this class? How could I improve it? How's my pacing? Do I ask effective questions? Can I improve classroom discussions? These are all types of questions to analyze and evaluate your own teaching performance. The specific question is very important. And 3 types of data collection options here. Of course, you can write your thoughts and observations on the back of a lesson plan immediately after the teaching episode or at the end of the day. This is what happened. This is what was effective. This is what's not effective. To analyze your lesson, you could record it, video or audio record the episode for later analysis and evaluation. Or you could have a colleague conduct a peer observation or a series of observations over time. And I would need some sort of structure, a lesson analysis chart. I recommend doing this. Characteristics you're looking for on one side, and simply observe what's happening on the other side. Don't overthink this when writing down these comments and observations. Record what you see. Let the categories emerge from the observations. And this is to be adopted and adapted. These are characteristics. You decide what you're looking for here. And above criterion, below, you decide. You can use this to analyze your own teaching or have someone else come and observe your teaching. Characteristics here, general comments over there. And if you're reviewing your own teaching performance, again, many snapshots over time. That was our alarm that went off here. I apologize. And again, use inductive analysis to identify the reoccurring themes or patterns. All right, the last thing I'd like to show you, and we'll have plenty of time for questions, proposals, products, and presentations at the end. And again, a proposal is one way to ensure that the project is germane to the needs of the mission of the school and meets appropriate academic standards. And if used for teacher professional development, it should be approved by an administrator. If you're using it for a master's thesis or a doctoral thesis, approved by an advisor prior to beginning the action research project. And here are some different forms. This is a global proposal form. The question, annotated bibliography, methodology, date, and plans for sharing. And again, an annotated bibliography And the type of sources should be determined by the school or district. And this is an annotated bibliography describing the study. And for smaller projects, and this is a rule of thumb, a generalization. For small little projects, minimum of 3 sources. For larger projects, 10 to 15 sources. Master's thesis would be more than that. And again, that is to be determined. I find that once I get into a project, I'm interested and I tend to get a whole bunch of sources. If you have a passion for your topic, the sources will come to you. A list of sources used and a short description or annotation of each. And then the plans for sharing. Describe what the product or performance is going to be to disseminate the results. How am I going to get this out there? It could be a scholarly paper or a report. You could disseminate it within the district, the community, or state organizations at conferences, or send it to a journal for consideration for publication. But some sort of paper or report is one type of project. Remember, it must be shared. This is how we make our profession more professional. Here are the elements of an action research paper. Generally, you have your problem or your topic. You have your literature review. You have your methodology, and this would be kind of the same thing if you're writing a short report, a journal article, or a thesis. Your methodology, your results, describe the data, what data you collected, and conclusions are always based on the results. And then a plan of action. That's just a general form for a research paper. And then, of course, presenting at professional conferences like this, school or district workshops or presentations, or webinars or other online presentations. And you're probably more familiar with the variety of online formats than I am. YouTube is a great way to disseminate ideas. LinkedIn, academia.edu. These are just some of the ideas. And with that, I'm going to take some questions and make sure I put in the chat box. Get out of this one here. I'm going to copy and paste the links that have recordings to this session. And I'll see if I have some questions here. If someone has a question in English, I'll be happy to answer your question.
Yes, you have some questions from the participants in the Q&A section.
In the Q&A?
Yes.
Okay. How is action research? I can read the ones in English, I'm sorry. How is action research different from DBR? Sounds like it's a part of DBR. Help me out with that. What is DBR?
Design-based research.
Design-based instruction.
Research.
This I do not know. I do not know the answer for that. Maybe design-based instruction or research is based on action research. Action research has been around for a while. Action research is systematic. Is there another question? What are the main differences between action research and design research?
Professor Johnson, do you want me to just allow to owner of that question, Nesrin Öztürk, ask what you want?
Verbally, any way you want to do it is fine with me, yes.
Okay, I just need to allow to talk. Nesrin Hocam, sorunuzu sorabilirsiniz direkt.
Teşekkür ederim hocam. Beni duyabiliyor musunuz?
Duyuyoruz.
Peki, merhaba. Hello, Dr. J. This is part of the research actually that I am engaged in recently. And working on design-based research, and I mean, to my best knowledge, I can see that action research is kind of part of it. So we do kind of systematic design of the instruction, and we collect data and analyze the data, and depending on the data or the findings, let's say, we design for the classrooms, of course, the instruction or the materials or whatever the focus of the research is. So it is still systematic, but it is like a dynamic research that you can make changes within the process depending on the needs and the findings within the process. Thank you.
Very good. Sounds like they're very similar.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you very much.
Teşekkür ederiz Mesut Hocam.
Any other questions? I only have one language. I apologize for that.
Okay, do you want Ahmet Bey çevirebilecek misiniz yoksa ben mi çevireyim?
Do you want to read them out loud or ask them or however you want?
Okay, another question from Dilber Polat. Okay, thank you very much for the nice presentation. There's a tendency regarding the action research as a standard. So what are the basic steps for the action research?
The action research, I provided the basic steps.
And there's the further question as well. Is there the action plan for each stage of the action research?
Is there an action plan for each step?
Yes.
Uh,
each research. Is there the action plan for each in the research?
Oh, do you want an action? There should be an action plan for each research project. Based on this is what I'm going to do. Maybe you found that a strategy was effective. Okay, based on that, this is how I'm going to implement the strategy. But some sort of action, and it could be a recommendation. In this way, it's no different from reading a research report in a journal. They always have conclusions and recommendations at the end. If it was effective, fine, this is how it might be used or how I will be using it. I hope that answered your question.
And another question from Dilber Polat as well. Are the field notes, when it comes to our field notes, can we use camcorder to record it and then write it down?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
When it comes to our field note, can we record the field notes by the camcorder and later write it down?
Absolutely. It's flexible how you want to do it. Absolutely. Camcorder and then take notes. And if you're evaluating your own teaching performance, absolutely.
And there's another question from Aysun Öztürk. I think you answered this question. What are the main differences between the action research and design-based research? So no problem. And Nesrin, Dr. Nesrin Öztürk, I think she was happy with the response. And another question, Serpil Özbay from Istanbul. So when a teacher is conducting an observation in her, the classroom, so the students can behave in different way. So how can we guarantee the reliability of the data we gathered from the students in the classroom?
If you're looking at behavior,
or any kind of the things, if they are collecting data from the students in the classroom.
and again, if you're in a teaching situation, that's when you'd probably use a camcorder of some sort. And it really depends on what behaviors you're looking at. If it's micro behaviors like that, you'll need some sort of audio recorder or camcorder to record actual behaviors. That's where I like to use a data retrieval chart where I have the behaviors listed and simply put notes or tally marks when I see instances of the behaviors.
Okay, there's one more question from the anonymous attendee. Thank you for the nice presentation. What do you think about the paradigm of grounded theory? Is it mixed or is it the experimental? So this is there's debate about the grounded theory, whether it's mixed or it's experimental in recent years. What do you think?
Yes, in the United States, some people only value the quantitative experimental research. And to me, how could it be scientific if you are discounting a whole wealth of data? It's like looking at reality through a tube saying, I'm going to ignore all this qualitative data, things that are happening. The qualitative data puts the numbers in context. It provides meaning. So absolutely, the mixed method is the best. Absolutely. But the question should determine the methodology. Sadly, some people say only experimental research can be used to establish causal effect. Well, that is absolutely ludicrous. You can use observational and qualitative research to establish qualitative effect or cause and effect. I use the example, I was riding my bike, I hit some silt and I broke my ribs. I did not need a qualitative study to tell me that the silt caused me to break my ribs. It was observational. So ideally you're using both, but numbers alone provide a distorted view of reality. You got me going on this one because numbers provide this distorted view of reality, and without context, there's little understanding. I hope that answered your question, but I feel very passionate about that we should not ignore any forms of research. Who do statistics? Yes, you can do statistical analysis or quantitative data, and I say use that with caution. Again, if the question calls for that, absolutely, but you're looking only at yours. You're not projecting your results you're not generalizing to a larger population. You can't say, based on what I'm doing in my classroom, here's what all classrooms should do. You cannot generalize the results of your action research study to larger populations.
Okay, there is one more question in Turkish from Gülşah Geres, Can Timer. And thank you very much for the nice presentation. It was very helpful. And what are the strengths of action research towards the other research methods?
It's the flexibility of design that you can change right in the middle. And it is an observation of your teaching practice. Your teaching practice. So it helps you understand what you are doing in your classroom. So I don't know if it's you would call it a design or a method, because you're using mostly qualitative methodology, but you can use quantitative methodology as well.
Okay, there are two questions in English in the Q&A section, so I can read it for you.
Thank you.
Is one observer enough for the observation in action research? One subject, one subject, then an observer is enough for the action research.
Is one subject enough?
Observer, as an observer.
Oh, one observation or one observer?
One observer.
One observer. If you are the only observer, that's fine. If you're taking small snapshots over time, and I recommend at least 2 data sources, absolutely. The onus is on you to provide an unbiased and coherent report.
Okay, I think we have 2 more, and it is in English again. So what do you think about the concept of mixed method action research in the data analysis phase of action research?
If mixed method is the best way to answer your question, absolutely. The question should determine the data. But remember, you're not generalizing to a larger population. You're not comparing one group to another to say this is how all math should be taught.
Okay, another question. I think it's the final question by Nesrin Öztürk. How successful is action research to change the policies there? It has been a while, at least regarding the core standards.
I would say not successful at all. There's still much top-down control. We need to empower teachers to make decisions. And action research is one way we can take back our profession, where the classroom teacher can conduct research instead of just us professors conducting it. We need to empower teachers to conduct action research projects. And that's why I tried to simplify the process. Teachers have very busy lives. We have to respect the busy life of teachers and make action research accessible to them. So I'm hoping there'll be a change before I retire to empower teachers to be agents of change. But in America right now, it's too top-down.
So I think we have no question left for you. And again, thank you very much for accepting our invitation to organize this such a nice workshop. It was very insightful. So do you have final say before?
It has been a pleasure to talk with you. I wish I could be there in person to see you, to interact, but I can't.
Yes,
but I just want you to know.
Yeah, we had the planned this in previous year, in year 2021, so we couldn't make it. Now we at least we made it. So you are the author of the book Action Research. So it was translated into Turkish by Ana Publishing Company, and now we have there is one final question. I think if you have time, we have maybe one more question. Let me see it. And Dilber Polat, she is just giving her thanks. No problem. Thank you for you. And now we have a surprise for you. So we do give certificates in physical, in person, but now we are going to give you the digital certificate, but this is very important for you. And it is Ana Publishing Company is donating trees from under the name of TEMA, we call it Turkey Foundation for Combating Erosion, Afforestation and Conservation Natural Assets. So it's coming through.
Okay.
And now we're sharing it with you.
I don't.
Yes.
There's something.
Yeah,
Oh.
yes. And we would like to thank you for your supporting this conference as well on the behalf of TEMA. And thank you very much again, and thanks to all the participants. They were with us. So thank you, and talk to you later. So,
Very good. Thank you much. I will see you another time.
okay, thank you then. Bye-bye.